So again, today is all about RPA and process mining. And when we look at the agenda, we'll first have Caspar giving a short introduction and talking about some context information. After that, we'll have Tom, who will highlight the ARIS RPA capabilities and also perform a live demo. In between, we'll have a short comfort break so as to allow you to grab some coffee or do other things, but make sure to hold on because the live demo will be exciting. Then after that, we'll have a Q&A with the expert panel. As said, it will be with Tom, Caspar, Julian, and myself. And finally, we'll wrap up with some key learnings and some interesting information. So again, please hold on. We scheduled this session for 2 hours, so it will run until noon local time. And so with that being said, Caspar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Hi, my name is Caspar. I would like to provide a short introduction to today's topic and also give you some contextual information, as I like to call that, the big picture. Now, before we get started, let me take a high-level view, and I don't think we can get much higher than this, and share with you the state of RPA and process mining. And it might bear not much of a surprise that by the year of 2024, a lot of analysts have predicted that the total market size for RPA and for process mining combined will be in excess of 6 billion euros a year. Still, we see failure rates in RPA and process mining implementations in between 30 to 50%. So if you think about that, between 2 and 3 billion euros a year is potentially wasted on failed implementations. And the first question then is, why? So what are typical root causes for failure in RPA? Because that's our main topic for today. Sharing with you some other research that has been done. One of the first root causes is the fact that the process that you're trying to automate is more dynamic than anticipated. Not every process is straight through processing. It's just a matter of clicking. There's always exceptions and dynamically changing environments. So that doesn't help. The second one is that, as you can imagine in RPA, where a piece of software is just repeating activities over and over again, if it's been instructed to grab a piece of information from a different website and that website got changed, but the RPA software has not been changed, you might be grabbing the wrong piece of information. Not useful. Number 3, political implications. Well, RPA, the same as process mining, by the way, tends to make things transparent. And transparency is not always appreciated by everyone in the organization for various reasons. I will not go into that because we can talk for days on this alone, but this does certainly happen. And finally, the initial expectations were unrealistic. It's very often that if I look around all the advertisements around RPA, it all is made to believe it's going to be very easy. And the first robot might be easy, but scaling it up to commercial and productive sizes is anything but simple. So we need to be realistic about that, but Tom will go into detail on a number of these anyway. Now, before I hand over to Tom, the one thing I would like to do is put things a little bit into context, because what you will see when you go out to social media, there's a lot of talk about RPA, a lot of talk about process mining, and all that is great. But what I seem to be missing a lot is the big picture. How does that all fit in? And in order to give you that big picture, let me start by the very essence of any organization, which is the business strategy. So you have a vision and a mission, you're there for a reason, and your strategy basically defines how you want to win in the marketplace. And that business strategy needs to be translated into an operating model to make sure how do we structure and organize our company, and how do we structure all of our enterprise resources, such as people and applications and machineries and raw materials, to make sure that we get to the ultimate benefit and have a profitable enterprise. Now, in the operating model, you have different concepts and elements, and I want to pick out two of them. One is your business processes and risks, because in the end, everything that you do in an organization runs through a process, whether you like that or not. And the other one, which is also equally inevitable, is your system landscape. So every business process is supported by an application nowadays, which compared to the early days is obviously different. And there's a lot of interaction between business process on one hand and your system landscape, so your applications on the other hand. Now, having those business processes and applications alone doesn't do you much good. You need to make sure that you have governance around it. If things change, make sure that if your process changes, that also your underlying application is being at least reviewed to see if it needs to be changed. On top of that, or even as a foundation, there is a lot of operational and application excellence going on already for decades, I would say, if you look at continuous improvement and Lean Six Sigma. Now, everything you do up until this point, and it goes further, it even goes into your SOPs and work instructions, but it's all focused in the end on execution. Whether it's system integration, whether it's work instructions, you are enabling your employees to execute the things that you need to get done to achieve, in the end, your strategic goals. Now, this is very conceptual. This is what happens in every company. This is not being treated with the same, let's say, importance and significance as it should in every company, but that's all right. And then how do all these great little additional tools come in? Now, there is roughly, you can make a distinction in two types of tools. The first group of tools, they support execution. So it's their aim and their intent and their reason for being there is to help execution. The other set of tools is using information from execution to make the whole continuous improvement cycle complete. Now, so the first one that actually supports execution is RPA. So that's one of our that's the topic of today. So RPA tries to help you in your execution by taking away repetitive work from humans and making software do that. So the humans get more time to do more added value stuff. Another one that's been around for a long time is workflow automation. So it used to be called BPMS. Helps you in streamlining processes in their execution, actually. A third one that is also very hot right now is IoT. So you equip a lot of things with sensors and you get the information from the sensors, and that helps you in your day-to-day execution. So these are the three that typically look into executions. Now, the other two, and I'll start with task mining, is taking information from execution. So from your log files, you look at what are people doing, how are they clicking, what are they doing, what kind of programs are they using to do their daily job. And the last one, and that's also part of the scope for today, it's process mining. And process mining, obviously, based on the log files of your execution systems, it can reconstruct for you how processes have actually been executed with all of the benefits attached. It can do much more. We'll get back to that maybe a little bit later on. Especially those last two have a big input into your continuous improvement. So where do you start doing that? And how does your continuous improvement then link back to your operational excellence? That makes the whole cycle complete. So in a nutshell, all of these tools on the left-hand side are brilliant tools on their own, but the real benefit comes when you embed them into your wider business process management practice and make sure that they actually learn from one another and accelerate one another. And having said that, I would like to give the word back to Ricardo before we go listen to Tom.
Yes, thank you very much, Caspar. So before we dive into Tom's presentation, we would like to have a poll with you just to get a feeling of where you are. So I'll launch the poll. You'll find it on your right side, and I'll give you some moments to answer the questions. And at the end of each question, you will see the results. now launch the first question. And you should be seeing the question, which is, have you implemented RPA in your organization? Options being not yet, but considering, exploring or experimenting, already implemented, or I don't see the value of RPA. Votes are still coming in. And it seems that it is now stabilizing, so I will end the poll and share the results with you. So interestingly enough, although RPA has been on the market for quite some while now and seems to become mainstream, there are still organizations that haven't implemented it yet. The majority, 37%, have not yet implemented. Then an equal share of exploring and experimenting and already implemented, almost 30%, and 4% don't see the value. Then we'll go to the next question. Same question, but then for process mining. Have you implemented process mining in your organization? And again, the votes are coming in. And again, the results seem to stabilize. So I will end the poll and again share the results with you. Here we see a similar distribution, although when it comes to implementation, there's fewer organizations that have implemented process mining. 1/3 haven't implemented process mining yet, but are considering, and most organizations are in the phase where they are exploring and experimenting. In fact, that's what we're seeing as well. Many organizations that are moving on from process documentation, process modeling, towards measurement and improvement, and process mining certainly plays a role in there. 3% of the people don't see the value. So then on to the next question. Because that's in fact the very topic of today. Have you combined RPA and process mining? Not yet, but considering, exploring, experimenting, already implemented, or don't see the value. And as the votes come in, I'm seeing a result that certainly makes sense when you look at the outcome of the other two questions. So let's see what that is. %69% of the participants haven't combined it yet, but are considering it. And that is in fact promising, because again, this is the topic of today. It's promising to see that people are in fact considering combining those two technologies, two capabilities. 8% don't see the value, and there's only a small number that have in fact already implemented. That also implies that they are ahead of the curve and early adopters. So that's also interesting to note, but the majority is either considering or exploring. The fourth question is, how would you, or do you, use process mining in the context of RPA? So even if you're only considering, how would you use it? And if you have already implemented it, how do you use it? One could be to identify candidates for automation, another measuring success or the effects of automation. Obviously, the objective could also be to use it for both. And should there be other purposes that you have in mind, feel free to submit them into the chat, just for others to share. If you have brilliant ideas, or if you have in fact already applied it for different use cases, don't hesitate to submit those into the chat. All right, so let's look at the outcome of this question. So the majority, almost 2/3, are using it or would like to use it for both. So both for identifying candidates for automation upfront, as well as measuring success after the fact to make sure that the implementation or the automation was effective. 3% have other purposes, so would be keen to learn what that purpose would be. So still, if you would like to share it, please do that in the chat, and we can then Tom can also relate to that possibly. And then we go on to the final question. Which is, what do you consider challenges of RPA? Is it either finding the right candidates for automation, setting the right priorities? Is it human resistance and organizational factors? Is it governance and ownership? Is it managing the complexity of the bot landscape? Is it losing sight of process execution because you'll automate things and you don't know what's going on? Or is it the risk of shadow IT? So meaning that people are at liberty to create all kinds of robots without you being able to manage that centrally, to have standards for it, etc., etc. And I'll now end the poll to see the results. And we're seeing that almost 1/3 and the majority has difficulty finding the right candidates for automation, setting right priorities. But interestingly enough, that obviously relates to the previous question. That is in fact what we will dive into, how we could improve on that. There obviously are some other factors, human resistance. So what does it mean if you go and automate tasks and processes? Will people like it? Are they afraid of losing their jobs because of that automation? I can imagine that that would be one of the reasons why human resistance is a challenge. Followed by governance and ownership, managing the complexity, and then not many people are afraid of losing sight of process execution, so they are confident that things will run as they should. And finally, risk of shadow IT, 8%. That's a minority that considers that a challenge. So that's all interesting results. Hopefully it was also insightful for you to see how your peers are doing and how your peers are perceiving this topic. And Tom, I suppose this is a perfect opportunity to hand it over to you and see how what our vision is on these topics.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ricardo. So I just grabbed the screen. I hope you can see it already. Okay, nobody's saying something against it, so this should be the case. Yeah, so first of all, also welcome from my side. I'm happy to have so many people in this online event here today. I think also for me, it was quite interesting to see the answers to the poll questions. I just, especially now for the last one, so we just had a comment for this in the chat, where Jan said, I'd say all of the above to various degrees. I think that is absolutely true. That is what we see very, very frequently, that you have different challenges related to RPA, which make it interesting, complex, with some things that need to be addressed in the real projects and when you want to apply RPA. So what I actually will try to do is to hopefully address all of these things we now asked you. I try to deliver some answers for that. So actually maybe a few words regarding the agenda for the next let's say 45 minutes, 1 hour. So first of all, I want to start a little bit with the status quo on RPA and what the challenges are, where do we stand, maybe also how process mining helps here, why this is such an important building block for RPA. Regarding that status quo, we will give you some insights in our process-driven RPA approach, which should answer the question, so how can we overcome the challenges we see in today's RPA world? I will also try to do that very, very concrete with a subsequent live demo, and I think in the end we will also have some time for a recap and of course a Q&A from you. All right, before I start, I'm not sure about the level of knowledge in the audience today, therefore I want to make at least a very, very brief introduction of RPA, so what we are actually talking about. So we are talking about software robots. Yeah, we are talking about little programs with the intention to automate things in general, to automate tasks. That tasks are typically characterized by a high volume. They are very repetitive. They are following typically more or less easy business rules, which can be easily described via a specific UI or easy rules, as I said, which don't require too much intuition. And the very specific characteristic of RPA or software robots is that they are replicating the interactions of people. Yeah, so they are not working via APIs or so typically they are really replicating the interactions of people with their systems, with their IT applications in a way they would do that. So they are really working on the UI level of a computer. Maybe some general aspects or some interesting facts regarding RPA. So a question I see quite frequently is, it's is it a hype? So a lot of people are talking about that. Is it really a hype? Is it just another way of automating things? Of course, yes, it is another way of automating tasks and activities. But actually, I think there are some interesting facts or KPIs we can consider here. So the first is the market growth, actually. Yeah. So Gartner said recently that RPA is the fastest growing segment of the global enterprise software market. So it's 63%. I think that is a very impressive number. And this really shows how fast RPA is growing, and maybe also how relevant it is to the organizations worldwide. Second point I would like to highlight. So I'm sure you know the OPEX. The OPEX is an organization that brings people together, organizations together, vendors together, and analyzes and shares knowledge around operational process improvement. And end of last year, they conducted a survey. The European Leadership Survey, and here they said, okay, that 41% of the operational process improvement programs in the participants of that survey said that they're really focusing on process automation with RPA. Sorry. So this is really also a very interesting number, which really shows the importance for operational process improvement. The last thing, I think that is also a very interesting thing, which comes from McKinsey. I think everybody knows McKinsey. So they estimated at the end of 2019 that about 50% of today's workforce activities could be automated, and 10% of that activities at a very high rate, above 90%. So this is really very, very interesting and shows the potential you have with RPA. However, there are of course a lot of challenges we see today, since this is of course a theoretical number or a theoretical estimation, which requires a lot of work, a lot of investigation of the circumstances, and this is exactly what we actually want to do. So maybe if we have a look at the real RPA projects in the organizations, they typically follow a specific, it could be a life cycle, or it could be a process as well, which consists of different phases. Yeah? So typically you start with the discovery. The idea of the discovery is really to identify the opportunities for automation. In the analyze phase, it then comes to a detailed investigation where you really need to connect the knowledge, capture the knowledge that is required to do an automation. So you really need a very deep and detailed level of knowledge regarding the interaction level, the click level of the people when they're interacting with their computers to execute a process. You then have to design the process. Design can mean different things. Typically, the focus is here really on developing a blueprint, I would say, for the implementation. So that could be a visual blueprint, that can be a process model, something like this, before it then comes to the actual development of the robot, which is of course the core of today's RPA solution. The robots are then deployed to the live infrastructure in the organizations. You need to operate them, you need to maintain them, and finally you also have to govern them. So that, in a very short, how the process for real RPA projects look like in the organizations. However, if we have a look at the RPA market, I think this would be a little bit a different picture for that. Yeah, so typically it would look like this. So you have a little bit of the design. You have, of course, the development of the robots in the core of today's RPA solutions. Then you have the deployment and operations. Of course, that's also part of that, but I would say with some gaps. And what we see in the last couple of months, of course, is some organizations also started with a discovery, with an analyze, more or less, maybe also with some additional capabilities, own solutions. So we see a lot of traction here, but finally, this is more or less how you can see the RPA market in its core, actually. which of course leads to several problems, challenges. So first is really, especially if the starting points here, so the discovery and the analyze is missing, you run into the situation that about 50% of the opportunities for automation are missed. The reason for that is quite simple. If we have a look at the real RPA projects, and especially in the starting phases, you typically have a group which is consisting of representatives of different business units, representatives of IT, representatives of a, let's call it the process center of excellence. And so you have a lot of people there, and especially the people from the business have a lot of, also from IT, by the way, have a lot of ideas on what could be automated. Ideas, no real foundation for that, which are founded in some facts or so, but the point is really they have some ideas what could be automated, what is easy to automate, what could work well, maybe which would also solve some challenges or working issues of individuals. So this is typically where a lot of people start, where I think in a POC that's okay, but finally if you really want to create a reliable automation pipeline, this might very, very fast become a problem. Second, what is also very important, that about 70%, and that's also a fact we see from the real RPA projects, 70% of the RPA project resources are spent to pre-automation. Pre-automation means first discover the automation potential, and second analyze the candidates on a detail that allows you to implement the robots. So this is really very, very important number here, since that automatically also means that about 30% are only spent to the robot development and to the deployment, into the design and things like that. So this is really something you should have in mind when you are going into the planning phase of an RPA project. And the last number I want to share, that so that is a finding from the big consultant companies of from last year, that only 4% of the organizations are today able to scale across 50 bots. So the reason for that is typically that the business value is more or less unclear, which does of course not mean that there is no business value, but that means that the business value is typically not captured and communicated to the management. So this is also something which also shows. So we had the just in the poll, more or less managing the complexity of the bots landscape. Imagine you have 50 bots now in place, and now you have to manage all of them. Who is doing that? What are the bots doing? What are the application systems they are working with? So you really need a very solid and structured basis in order to be able to do that actually. That's also the reason why we say, okay, let's really try to cover all the different phases in a process-driven RPA approach with the corresponding building blocks. The topic for today especially is process mining and RPA. So I want to focus on this here a little bit, since this is what is typically called the RPA use case discovery. So I just mentioned that, discovering the automation potential, analyzing them on a detail that allows you to implement some bots. So actually, if you are addressing all of them, you have different terms for that today. Typically, a fully integrated intelligent automation platform, or hybrid automation platform, hyper intelligent automation, all of this. So I think there are a lot of terms for that. We just call it that way, with a little bit of a focus on the use case discovery. We will see what that means in the next couple of minutes.
Tom, one question came in related to the previous slide. Can you let us know the basis, or actually the one before, can you let us know the basis for your challenges estimation? 50% automation opportunities missed, 70% RPA project resources in pre-auto, and so on. So the question is, what is the source? Or the basis? Absolutely. So for the 50% of the automation opportunities, the source for that is an investigation from Deloitte from 2019. So I can
grab the very concrete source and the link, and I can share that, of course, afterwards. But as you know, that's Deloitte. The 70% of the RPA project resources, so we are working together with our partner Crine, and we are working in a lot of RPA projects here, where we also include task mining, also process mining, and that is something where we did a comparison. How did this work before we had that technologies in place, and afterwards, and especially before we had a process mining and task mining capabilities. This was really an investigation. We see at on the average on the RPA implementation that about 70% is spent to that, also combined with some internal customer surveys here. And the 4% across bots, that's also 4% of organizations are able to scale across 50 bots. That is something that comes also from the big consultant companies. I think this year was from McKinsey, also from last year. So up to date, of course. I can share the link afterwards as well. But that is also in investigation. We see very, very often, if you have a look at some experts, some consultancy firms, some research articles in the web from the consultancy firms. So this is really a very common number in that sense. Hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay. So we just talked about the fully integrated intelligent automation platform. So actually, what do we need? So I just explained a little bit the framework, I would say, or the process which we see in reality for RPA. And of course, what is necessary to address it in the best possible way is that you need different building blocks for that. Let me start with the discovery. So typically what we see here is, first of all, of course, process mining, because process mining allows you to really have a look at the challenges an organization is facing in their real environment with their circumstances individually. Second, maybe also a BPA approach. So if there's already a structured repository, for example, in place where you have details about how your company is operating, this might also be a very solid basis for discovering the automation opportunities. Second, the analyze. What was done here in the past was typically that you are conducting a lot of interviews with employees, talking with them about what they are doing. Maybe the employees showed them in specific workshops how they're executing a process, which applications are used, and things like that. And typically you have a bias here, of course, and the idea is here really to automate this to a very high extent by applying task mining, and that is exactly the building block from a technical perspective for that analyze phase. For the design, the idea is actually to map the automation solution and embed it into a robotic or in a process landscape, which allows you, of course, to manage the complexity and improve what you are doing before you are going into the automation. It then comes to the development. Of course, that is, as I said before, the core of the RPA industry, actually. So here you really develop the robot with a robot development environment. Deploy and operate means that, of course, you bring the robots into the live environment in your organization, roll that out. What is very important, and we saw that just in the poll questions as well, is that you typically have human resistance against the rollout and the application of bots. And I think therefore it's really essential to also focus here on a deployment, on an enterprise rollout to the affected employees, because they have the concerns and they have to know what a robot is actually doing. And with that, it very, very often becomes very quickly clear that a robot is not able to replace a human workforce at all, but there is still the interesting aspects of the process execution which need some human intuition, for example, that these parts are still, of course, executed by the people. So this is really a very strong instrument against that human resistance, actually. And finally, and this is also forgotten very, very often, you have to capture the benefit. So in the end, the idea is really to not only execute an RPA program and implement one robot and that's it. So actually, if you want to make it successful, you need to scale. And to scale it, you need to validate and communicate the RPA success. You need a reliable automation pipeline, and this needs to be proof in order to get the management buy-in, the ownership, and finally also the possibilities to grow. So that is the idea for the different building blocks. Before I go into the demo, let's go through that step by step. I also want to make at least, or to share some examples what we see so far. But before, since this is a question I get very, very frequently, I want to let some words about process mining and task mining. So I see a lot of very, very confusing articles in the web, and when people are talking about that, so very often it goes into a direction, process mining versus task mining. To be honest, I can absolutely not understand that, since this is a synergy, a very strong synergy. Let me tell you why. So on the basis, you have people. You have people that are executing some steps with the intention to execute some tasks. Yeah, and to execute this task, they're typically using some application system. That can be a Salesforce, this can be an SAP system, your ERP system. This can also be, I don't know, an Excel or something else. Yeah? If we now have a look at process mining is taking the event logs from the affected or from the application systems that are used during the process execution and analyzes the digital footprints of their IT systems in order to have a look on the end-to-end processes with the intention to optimize the business processes, again, from end to end. So typically you're having a look at the weak points, at the bottlenecks of a process, and this is a very good entry point where you can see, okay, this is something I need to have a deeper look at, where I need to solve a problem. Task mining, on the other side, has a completely different touch point here. So they are not connecting to the event logs, to the digital footprints of the IT applications, but they are looking at the people, how they're executing the steps. So this is really typically an application installed on the client computer, on the employee's computer, which is collecting the data on the user interaction with the focus on automation, actually, in order to see, okay, how is the employee working actually with the application system in order to execute the task, and finally then maybe to generate the RPA bots. So this, I think that makes it very clear why this is not vice in either or process mining or task mining. So it's really absolutely the combination of that which makes absolutely sense. And as we just said, process mining for the discovery phase and task mining for the analyze phase, actually. Let me start with the discovery and some things around that. So the idea is here really, as I just said, to focus on the real business problems. While we saw in the past that, of course, again, people have some ideas on what could be automated, process mining delivers a reliable basis for this. So with process mining, you really have the possibility to see what are the weak points in my process, what are the bottlenecks. Maybe also I can see what is executed quite frequently, or what is what has a long duration and things like that, which might indicate an automation potential actually. So this is really why we focus here on the process mining for that discovery phase, actually. We saw that, by the way, also. So if we have a look at the bots that are deployed today, we are really talking about some supporting processes, easy processes, and what we can see here really is if we focus on what has the biggest business outcome, the biggest effect, also to the customer side, to the cost side, whatever. So this is a very nice example here where we have Gol, which is a airline in Brazil, the largest airline in Brazil, and they were one of the first which were really focusing on their core processes here, and they are actually updating their flight schedules using bots, which really led into the situation that they were able to significantly reduce the processing times from 20 days to 4 hours, which is really a completely shift, which is a differentiator in that industry actually, because they have the possibility to very early inform people about some flight updates, schedule changes and things like this. So this is really where something where they internally have a very huge effect on how they can act and also how they can communicate to their customers actually. The second thing, I just talked about task mining. Again, the idea is here to prevent some bias when you're talking to people, and this is exactly what you can do here. You have the robots, the discovery bots, sorry, on the client side, on the employee side, which allows you to investigate the details of a process. And what we really recommend for everyone who's thinking about automation, typically one process or one case is not equal to the other. So you typically have differences here which are differently distributed maybe, and there's also what you can see here in the background on that screenshot. And typically we want to keep the complexity low, and therefore we should always start with the variants that are executed the most often. Then you have a more or less simple solution, and then only add additional variation if that really makes sense, and if you have a good balance between additional complexity and business value. Yeah, so that is exactly what we need to think here about, and that is also exactly what we need to communicate to the employees that are affected in order to eliminate the concerns they have on their side. Very interesting example for that is EDF. I think most of you know EDF. That is the second largest energy supplier in the world, based in France, and they are actually using process mining to identify the bottlenecks and actually the factors that lead to automation breaks. So 2 years back, they started with RPA and also with process mining, and really what they actually want to achieve is they want to automate their financial transactions, yeah, using RPA. And as I just mentioned, you have different situations that lead to the fact that you are not able to continue with a bot, but people have to make the next steps. And this is exactly what they try to investigate with process mining in order to see what are the key factors that are leading to that fact. And if there is a business case, which is still the case, of course, they are adding that to the bot implementation, and yeah, until this year they already plan to execute 45% of their financial transactions automatically. I think that is a very nice example for that. Where I also, of course, want to share that use case discovery, RPA use case discovery area, and why it really makes sense to combine that process mining with the task mining aspects here in the discovery and the analysis phase. So there are only a few organizations which are able to do that, and I think that is exactly what we try to focus here on. Design. So now we have the knowledge and the information that is required for the automation, and a mistake a lot of organizations actually do is once they have the information, they go into the implementation. Typically that does not make any sense, because you also would not do that in a process management project, for example. So you typically should always focus on improvement. So don't automate a poor process, but improve it first. That is a key message I want to share here. And regarding that complexity, also document that in your process landscape. So we have here, especially in ARIS, we will see that later on, specific new constructs which allow you to express an attended or an unattended robot, and robotic operating procedure. We will see how this works and what it is later on. But the idea is here really to express the fact that something or some parts of the processes are executed by a bot versus people, or maybe also by both. Development, I think that is quite clear. There are a lot of RPA solutions or RPA development environments in place. Typically what we see here really as an enabler is if you have a possibility to enable more or less a business to develop somehow. So typically you have here possibilities to press a record button, which is something like a screen capturing where the robot is automatically developed, at least the basics for that, which is then the basis to hand over to IT for the refinement and completion of the bot. Before then comes, of course, to the deployment. I think, again, deployment to the IT, that is a clear part, but how to roll out that knowledge to the employees is a completely different story. And we will see how this could look like and how to make it visible to the employees, what the robot is doing, how this works, and what the robot is doing on a detailed level. And finally, capturing the benefits communicated to the management actually. So that is something very individual, I think. So every automation case has different KPIs, and I think it's very important to make this work in order to present something with the right KPIs to the management, which allows to argue the success of your RPA initiative. So this was for now my my slide part. The next thing I would do is to go into the demo. As far as I know, we have a short bio break before,
yes,
right, Ricardo?
Just to allow you to digest all of this and also to grab a cup of coffee. We'll have a 4-minute comfort break. We'll return at 11 local time. So then we'll dive into the live demo. Thank you for your patience, and see you in 4.
Thanks.
Albeit short, I hope that everyone was able to refresh, grab a cup of coffee, and then we can start the second part of this innovation seminar, which is the live demo. Tom?
Absolutely, yes. Okay, so we have now already seen a lot of things, a lot of ideas, and what I want to do is to give you an impression on how this could look like in real environment. So actually, I want to show a running example. Yeah. So what I want to start first is to jump into a process area. Yeah. So I want to focus here on the pre-sales management. Maybe only to give you a little bit of a context for this. So we are talking about a digital campaign and the handling of a digital campaign here. So we have some marketing around an arbitrary product. Yeah, so we have a website maybe with a contact form which allows a customer or a prospect to enter his personal data in order to get, I don't know, a free trial or a personal demo or something like this. We need to handle the lead that is generated by this somehow. We may want to conduct a product demonstration, and finally, in some cases, it leads to a sales order. So a very general case, I think all of you are aware of. I want to start with a little bit of process mining, actually. So what I have here in my dashboards environment is, first of all, an overview on the general KPIs, the general aspects and analysis for this specific process, end-to-end process. where I get some general information. Yeah, so how long is the process cycle time on average, or how is it distributed? We can see the cycle time for the entire process, for example. We can see how often the process is executed per month on a specific timeline here, and things like that. So the first thing I see here is that I have here 3 different lines, and one of them, the red one, is customer lost. So obviously it seems that I lose a lot of customers during that end-to-end process, and of course I'm actually interested in the reasons for that. In order to do that investigation, I go into my discovery dashboard here and have a look at the details. So let me zoom in a little bit. I can see here the different touch points in the system I am analyzing. So I got here the customer request. I create and qualify some leads. Don't know what this means exactly on a detail level. I have to handle some customer requests. Sometimes it's qualified out. Sometimes I have to contact the customer, and so on and so on. What I'm now interested in is this here, customer lost, and what the reasons for this are. So I just select that. I can see, okay, there are 4 different process variants which are leading to this state that we lose a customer. I select that. And what I actually want to do is that I want to analyze the root causes, reasons for that. And for this, I can use here in our process mining environment the so-called root cause miner. I just click on new, and it take exactly this variance I just selected as search criterion, or this should be you can call it a symptom maybe. And click on start, and immediately you get some results here. So let's have a look at these results. The first I can see here is that the sales responded in time is no. So this is for all of the process instances the case. So really all of them have this criterion. Obviously we have here the corresponding SLA, which says sales has to respond to a specific customer request within X days, for example, and this was not met in all these cases. Also, some reason for that might be the sales region, as we can see here, that the lead was not created in time. So obviously there's also an SLA. So actually, let's really focus on this. I apply this as a filter. And the next thing I want to do is to go into the automation potential analysis. This means, so first of all, I have here exactly the extract of the process I'm interested in, or on the variants I'm interested in. I just selected them with the corresponding selection of filter criterion. And here on the right-hand side, I have a chart which allows me to identify some automation potential. What does it mean? So typically you have some basic KPIs like the number of occurrences. So how often do I have to execute a specific task, and a processing time or a waiting time. A waiting time is quite interesting, since that says how long do I have to wait until I am able to start that to execute a specific task. So this would typically mean that I have a resource problem here. So this might be a bottleneck. And finally, if I'm looking at these indicators, I'm especially looking on the top right corner of that matrix here, which says here, for example, create and qualify lead and contact a customer. So since we have this create and qualify lead here on the top right corner, I want to really focus on this one. Different things. So first of all, I go here into my diagram again, and I want first of all to have a look on whether I already have information in my process repository here. So I have here a lead handling process. I click on that, and that's actually the as is one. I open that. Let me zoom in a little bit. So what is actually happening? I have here obviously a marketing operations and a sales guy who's interacting with a customer. So I have to create a lead in Salesforce. I have to look up some prospect details. I have to determine the lead priority, update the lead here in Salesforce, and then send a call to action to the regional sales guy. So, and he then decides whether a lead is qualified out or whether he sends him information and requests a demo day proposal and things like that. So actually what we see is that every single lead needs to be managed, finally at least, by a sales representative. So I think this is a lot of work for him. This could be something that could be improved at the first step. But also I have some problems understanding this here, since I have no idea what it means to determine a lead priority, for example. And this is exactly where I want to jump from the process mining and process analysis here to the task mining aspect. For this, I go into my process discovery console. So again, what I actually did, I just had a look at the regional marketing guy, and I installed some discovery bots on his computer in order to see what he's actually doing and how this works. So I identified different processes here for him. Of course, this is not a name which is automatically generated, so I have to give the identified process a name, and I'm looking here at the lead handling. I click on that, and what is happening now that I get a quite similar representation of the process here, really step by step, where I have the possibility to look at some corresponding screenshots which are captured automatically. So obviously, if I can see here, okay, he's creating a lead in Salesforce, and he's on the Salesforce website. He's creating the lead, entering the data, and so on and so on. I can see, okay, here is on Wikipedia, for example. I don't know what he is doing at Wikipedia, but nevertheless, I think that is something we should have a deeper look at. So as you can see, we already have a pre-aggregation of the things here. So I don't have every single user interaction that I say, for example, okay, I have here, for example, a login form where I have to enter the username, enter the password, click on login, and so on. But it's just fill in the form in that sense. Yeah. But of course, I also have the possibility to look into the details. I go here into the user recordings, and let me go here, for example, to one specific execution. So again, he is here looking for something for software AG at Wikipedia, and then okay, he is back to Salesforce. So obviously, he is taking the annual revenue from Wikipedia and sets a ranking based on that, and on the number of employees, as we just saw. So that is actually what he's doing. So he's looking up some prospect details from Wikipedia in order to determine the lead priority. So that is obviously what is behind that. I again go into my lead handling area here, and I just mentioned at the beginning that we should always start with the most often occurring variances. So of course I can add here additional variances which I identified during the observation of the process execution, which would automatically always lead to some additional complexities. That is exactly the reason what I said, that we should see what should be really added. I have now the possibility, first of all, to go back to my ARIS world, where I now want to design, of course, a new process in order to determine what should be automated with RPA. Let me go for this to the lead handling. And as you can see, what we actually did, we added here a lane called marketing robots. yeah, where we have everything placed in which should be automated via RPA. So we have here the details we just got from the task mining that are all behind this, and actually you have here exactly the possibility to go into the details. We changed some things, so the lead priority, entering the lead in Salesforce, all that things are done by the robot, but not only this. So the robot should also send some information to the product and the shop link to the prospects. He should also decide based on the lead priority whether he hands over a lead to sales or even not. So a lot of things are done here by the robot, which should lead into a significant reduction of the work effort for the regional sales, and hopefully then improve the number of leads he is able to manage in a meaningful time. So this is really an assistance for him. Let us see maybe how this works. So, or how it could look like. Sorry, I go into my environment here. So, sorry, let's say wrong. Okay, there we are. Okay. So of course the robots need to be managed actually. Also, before I go into the implementation, the idea is here really, and that is something very unique. I mentioned that already, to design what a robot is doing, to design a robot and to manage the robotic process landscape. Here I have a diagram which is showing me the robot and what is all related to the robot. So we can see here already he gets some request data from a request email, which comes from a marketing side. He transmits some data into Salesforce. He's executing these activities. You have a technical and professional responsibility person for this. Maybe you also have some troubleshooting procedures which you could directly access here in order to give some guidance to the IT guys, for example. But what we see as well is the so-called robotic operating procedure. There are different ways how to maintain this. So you could, for example, extract that document directly from the development environment for the robot, or also by task mining, where you can automatically generate a document, I don't know, Word, a PDF, a PowerPoint, or whatever, with a detailed instruction on what the robot is actually doing, step by step, with some user comments. So all of this can, of course, be automatically generated, no manual effort to do that. But of course, depending on how deep you want to model in ARIS, you can also go into the details for the diagram, which exactly shows on the very detailed level what is happening here with the bot. And this can be enriched with the corresponding image information, with the screenshots, and this can be very good rolled out to the employees, so you can really go here step by step through the process without having any knowledge about the process modeling notation, whether it is, I don't know, EPC or BPMN or whatever. So all that doesn't matter. You can just click through that. You can exactly explain what is happening in the real process. You have the screenshots available. So very strong tool which allows you to explain to the employee what is happening by the robots. So how does it work? Maybe let me give you an example. So I have here again my lead handling process, and I want to go to that demo request. So for example, let me put here in, I don't know, Caspar Jans, the first speaker we had today, and I add this here in the requested demo form. I want to be contacted via email, and I send the request actually. So what happens now? Actually, this is a request form, so an email is automatically sent to the marketing guy. You can see that here in the bottom right corner. So I'm now not doing anything anymore. So hopefully in a few seconds, I think within the next 60 seconds, the robot should start doing his work. and entering the things in Salesforce and so on. And I think the interesting thing is here that we are still able to monitor what the robot is actually doing, also via process mining. So here you have now something. So the robot is already starting. You have here something in place which allows you to track some interaction. And the robot is, of course, producing some logs. You can access this via process mining and see exactly what the robot is doing, how the robot is doing that, what the different situations and cases are the robot is actually executing. And this allows you to also combine that with the cases that are executing by people in order to, for example, determine the automation rate, which is a very, very important instrument to determine the success of an RPA implementation. So maybe what do we see here now? The robot is entering automatically the lead here in Salesforce based on the email. We will have a look on the emails at the emails that were already sent. So he now goes to Wikipedia here. You can see in the bottom right corner that there's already some emails sent by the robot in my inbox. He goes to Wikipedia, to the software AG page. He's looking for the revenue and the number of employees. He's going back to the to Salesforce and is entering the data. Finally, he's saving the lead, and that's it. So the robot did his job. I now take the control again, and I go into my inbox. And as I can see here, so that was the initial request. That was sent by the web form, yeah, with the general information that were entered by Caspar Jans. The first thing I received here is that I got some information which were sent by the robot. So he said, okay, thank you very much for your interest, things like that. Please send me 2 to 3 date and time proposals. So he already took some work over from the sales representative, which should make it easier for him. So if a customer of Caspar responds now with his corresponding time proposals, and this will directly get to the sales guy, and this will be the first contact for him. And also, I inform the sales guy that I have a new lead here from Software AG with a lead priority hot and with a direct link to Salesforce, which allows me to directly access the lead the robot just created. Yeah, so that is how it actually works. If I now go back to my ARIS system, I can, of course, here go into a dashboard, which is showing me the details of the robot execution. And this shows me exactly what the robot is doing, what the different variations are. So let me go here and show you the details, read an email, go to Chrome and open Salesforce, log in, set up leads. So all of this, and then you have some differences here, obviously. So this gives you some general information around that. Let me go back. So this is, of course, already process mining, where I can now see the details. But I think if it comes to an investigation on what did that finally means, I go back to my overall process and set here my time filter. So the switch to the automated part was here from 2018 to 19. And as I can see, I was now able to change the lines actually. So I'm able to win a lot of more customers. I'm able to qualify them out in a meaningful way, but we don't lose a customer because it takes too long for the customer, for example. So this is a very great achievement first of all. But also, if I have a look at the conformance rate we can determine with process mining, actually, we can also see, first of all, yeah, the execution type. So before, of course, we had a lot of or all processes were executed manually, while now we have a possibility to automate most of the processes automatically, not all of them, but to an extent of about 90%, I would say, on average, the process is executed automatically and sends information to the sales reps and to the customers, actually. We also can define here some conformance issues, or the system is identifying that automatically. So we can define what is conform, what is not conform. And we have here, for example, an activity or a situation where we lose a customer still, which should not be the case. So we define that as a non-conforming function. So we can click on that and then have a really detailed look on what the situations are in which we actually lose a customer. So this is really a nice instrument on how we can analyze the things also for conformance level on the details before and also after the automation and bringing the robots in place.
Tom, and one question in between.
Yes.
There's a question. I'm presuming when we monitor the robot actions that it will eventually tell us exactly in which step it failed, for us to be able to reassign the failed step. Is that something you could answer?
Actually, yes. So of course you have the possibility. So it depends, of course, on the implementation of the robot. So what you need in order to investigate the details for the execution of the robot, you need some log data and you need the corresponding information in the log data. So as far as you have that information in the log data, you can also visualize and present that in the process mining environment. Of course, yes. Next to that, of course, you also have, in all RPA solutions, the possibility to see, okay, this is a number of cases that were executed by a robot, this is a number of fails, this is a number of successes, but this is typically on a high level. So since the question is related to where did the robot stop working and what were the circumstances, that is exactly what you can do here as well. Sure.
Exactly, and this is exactly why also process mining there is very valuable, because it provides you insight into the execution of the robot as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, you're welcome. And then the last thing I want to show you, actually, also again combined with process mining, is the RPA impact dashboard. So we showed that also previously on the slides. So the idea is here really to build a dashboard that fits the case of the automation you are addressing with your RPA initiative. So something like the processing time reduction, or the some improvement rates, I think that are very typical KPIs. But for example, here increased revenue, improved conversation rates, increased number of processed leads. This is very specific for this lead handling process, or also for the end-to-end process. And I think that's very great to see, just that we are now able to work on a lot of more opportunities or leads at the same time, that we are able to significantly reduce the sales cycle, that we are able to close additional deals, since we have very good possibilities to focus on, especially for the sales. So I think that is exactly what is necessary to communicate a success to the management in order to get the buy-in, the ownership, and also the possibilities and the budget to grow with RPA, also especially to scale with RPA to numbers higher than 50 bots. And so I hope I was able to provide you a big picture on such a solution, on the different building blocks, how the different building blocks should be combined to a fully integrated automation platform, as I would call it. And I think that's now the end, at least, of the demo, and we can have some questions if there are some, of course.
In fact, that brings us to the expert panel, where people will have the opportunity to submit their questions in the Q&A, and we'll be answering them. But Tom, thank you very much for this comprehensive demo, showing the end-to-end approach on RPA, which surely goes beyond the mere development and deployment. As you demonstrated, it also dives into the discovery and analysis to identify candidates upfront, but surely also measures the effectiveness, so that you can track and trace exactly the robot's behavior and whether or not it led to improvements. Then for the Q&A expert panel, I would like to invite Tom, Caspar, and Julian. We already received a number of questions in the Q&A, but if you have some additional ones, do raise them, do submit them, and depending on the time, we try to answer as much as possible. If not, then we'll be sure to follow that up afterwards, so everyone will be sure that their question gets answered. One of the first questions, so more of a practical nature. When it comes to disclosing the activities that people perform and recording those, someone is asking, this looks like an impact on GDPR. How do you discover without hitting the privacy wall?
Yeah, very good question. Typical question also. Different aspects for that. So first of all, the robots are not providing or transferring any personal data. So it's a tool which is installed on a computer. The robot knows it's computer 1, it's computer 2, it's computer 3, and so on. Plus, you always are defining some white and or blacklisted applications. So typically, if you want to analyze how a process is executed in reality, you are not recording everything, every user interaction user is or an employee is performing, but you are focusing on specific things. So imagine the case we just talked about, that you have to enter some information in Salesforce, I have to enter some things in Wikipedia and so on. Then you would whitelist the applications that are actually used for executing the process and not more. Yeah, so that is the first thing. Second, as mentioned, you don't have personal information, so you never have the possibility to go back from the recording to a specific user. So that is not possible.
Thank you. Yeah. Then for another question, going back to the process mining bit that you demonstrated, Tom, and you showed that in fact process mining can indicate whether a step is automatable. So the question is, how do you define if a step in this view is automatable? It seems more like a potential root cause.
Yes,
automatically can be automatable. Can you clarify?
Absolutely. So what you just mentioned, that it's a candidate or that there's some potential, that's absolutely true. So of course we are not able to finally decide on the automatability of a specific task using process mining. So we can only work with indicators. That's always the case. The big difference is that we are working on the real business problems. Yeah, so we have a view on the end-to-end processes, and with process mining, we are able to identify the bottlenecks and the problems we should have a focus on. And what we try to consider then is whether RPA or whether automation at all could be a solution to overcome or to close that bottlenecks. Yeah, and therefore we have some indicators which allow us to put a specific problem issue into an automation or a candidate pipeline, which needs then to be verified, typically using task mining or another type of investigation. But the final decision whether it makes sense to automate this with this or that technology comes later after the discovery, of course.
So it's mostly an indicator which will help you to pinpoint, but surely you need some expertise and some further steps to truly identify it as automatable. Clear.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So then two questions combined from two different participants. Cryon is mentioned often. What is the relationship and what would be different with others like UiPath? And related to that from someone else, can ARIS Connect also interact with other RPA programs like UiPath?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the first bit about Cryon.
Yes. Okay. So Cryon is one of our partners. Cryon is our partner for our RPA solution. The advantage we have here is that there is a very close integration with ARIS. So, for example, you have possibilities to use data from the task mining engine in the process mining environment. You can transform operating procedures directly to ARIS. You can also in the future generate BPMNs that can be imported into ARIS. So all that things. So the special relationship we have here with Crine allows us to integrate our tools from a technical perspective, of course. If you now say that what about UiPath, and with that I come to the second question, or automation anywhere, or another tool from another vendor, that is of course possible as well. So as mentioned at the beginning, we are talking about different building blocks that are required to perform a successful RPA project or RPA initiatives. And it depends always on the question, what do you want to achieve, and how important is for you technical integration. So also this side can be addressed with other vendors to a different extent, of course, but again, you can of course develop the robots with UiPath also. So in general, this is not a problem.
Thank you. Then maybe a question for Julian. System landscape legacy is a big deterrent in realizing the potential of process mining and/or RPA. What do you see as the best approach to circumvent this roadblock? And then this person elaborates on the challenge. A disintegrated application landscape and silos logs are often not available from legacy apps. While the RPA platforms have closed ecosystem around this, APIs are not fully in place. So how do we do process mining with silos within an organization?
Mm-hmm. So I think that's the typical scenario that we see at customers, so that they have quite a lot of siloed applications, legacy applications that not provide a direct export or maybe API access to the actual execution logs. So for this, we have powerful extraction mechanisms, for example, to directly extract these required information from the databases, or maybe they also offer a certain export functionality to provide us with the required information. So that was never, I would say, a real roadblock in the past. So it's rather a common thing that we observe. So I think we have here the right expertise to help you to get to the right data and then start a process mining project. So maybe again important. So if you do process mining on an end-to-end process, I think it's really common that you have a siloed application in place, and not everything is already well integrated in a end-to-end process perspective. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. And then to add to your point, from my experience, in fact, it also contributes to this discovery, because ideally you would want to measure an end-to-end process, but sometimes you just don't know if you complete this. So during the process, you will find what the white spaces are, and that may in fact lead to further digitization. So you may come across an end-to-end process where there's some manual steps, which obviously you cannot measure upfront. That may lead to a simple automation, which then can at least help you identify the end-to-end, and you go from there. Let's see. Very practical question again. Can we bring in information from another RPA tool into the ARIS Connect dashboard?
Simple answer, yes.
Yes.
So actually, for the dashboards in ARIS, you can use arbitrary data sources. So the only thing that is required actually is access to the data. So this can be a flat file, it can be a database, it can be a system API or whatever. So as far as the data are available, we can access this via with ARIS dashboards, of course.
So actually, it does not matter what the data source is. It can be the ARIS repository, it can be ARIS Process Mining, but it can be any outside source as well. And then ARIS Connect, or rather ARIS Aware, which is the component that caters for the dashboard, brings it all together.
Correct.
All right. And related to that, how to customize the dashboard in ARIS Connect? How does that work?
Yeah, so actually that's quite easy. So you have two different things that are relevant for that. You have a so-called dashboard editor, which is a graphical editor which allows you to arrange different visual components like chart types or KPIs, style that, and things like that. So really a very easy UI web-based tool which allows you to build the dashboard. And in addition to that, depending on the data sources and depending on how much additional effort you want to or you need to put into building up the data, you have a feed editor, and the feed editor allows you to access different data sources, combine the different data sources also on a visual basis. So no need for coding or something like this. So all of this can be done directly in the web with graphical editors.
All right. So basically two main ingredients, which is widgets and data feeds to compose your dashboards.
Correct.
Great. Going back to your demonstration of task mining, Tom, how is the information from task mining converted to a BPMN model in ARIS Connect?
So this is a very good point. So there are two answers. One answer for today and one answer, I would not say for tomorrow, but for end of the year. So for today, you are going into the process mining. So I mentioned before that you have the possibility from task mining to use the recorded data, the aggregated recorded data, and feed that into the process mining environment. So with that, you would have a function flow representation of the interactions. Yeah, and from there you can very easily generate or export an EPC, so event-driven process chain, or a BPM model into your ARIS repository by selecting the identified variants. So the interesting thing is that here you really have the possibility to select the variants you are interested in, which you want to bring into your ARIS repository, and then export that to your ARIS repository and further edit that, of course. What we are thinking about in the future, of course, is also to make a BPMN export, which would then include the corresponding images, the corresponding applications, and so all the information that are required for the process mapping later on automatically directly from the task mining or from the robot development environment. So this is a topic for the roadmap, but again, already today you can bring that directly from process mining as an EPC or BPMN into the ARIS repository.
Thank you. For Julian, related to process mining again, and possibly you already answered it, but never hurts to repeat. How big is the effort to capture the logs that feed process mining?
That's a good question. So I think that heavily depends also on the system that you're using. So if you use standard applications like SAP, we have their accelerator packages that helps you to quickly get the data out of the systems, because everything is already predefined and you just needed to adapt it if required to your individual requirements. Of course, if you want to get data out of custom developed application, then we typically start a technical workshop with you at the beginning, so to see where is the data stored, what kind of data makes sense. And of course, it then depends on what you would like to analyze, what you would like to see. And this is pretty much contributing to the effort that you need to take care about. But I would say that we typically provide a technical POC in about 1 to 2 weeks. So typically it's pretty quick that we get to the first results.
Sounds good. Then Caspar, we haven't forgotten about you. More a question around the COVID situation. So due to the COVID situation, what do you think the attitude of the organizations will be towards RPA implementation, since COVID has had an adverse financial effect on the market?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Interestingly enough, yes, a lot of companies are now becoming more prudent when it comes to spending and making investment decisions. On the other hand, we also speak to our customers and potential customers in the sense that RPA is recognized for bringing results. That means that the initial investment does not have to be high, and the initial results can be significant if you do it right. So COVID is accelerating the need for organizations to start automating even more, and getting the human interaction element a bit on the downplay side at the moment.
It's I suppose it's a little bit of a paradox, isn't it?
It
On the
is.
one hand, because there's social distancing and some measures, we're not allowed to go into the workplace, so that actually is a case to further automate. On the other hand, of course, you need to look at the societal impact, the fear of losing jobs and stuff like that. So it's actually difficult to decide what direction to go. In normal times, obviously, we'd have said RPA is the way to go. You need to get rid of inefficient activities, but surely need to carefully look at when and where.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, let's have some final questions in. What would a typical implementation timeline be when there is nothing in place? So I suppose that means there's no RPA solution yet, there's no process mining yet. So basically you're building up your practice from scratch. So Caspar, maybe that's something you could elaborate.
Yeah, I'd love to start this question, and then maybe Tom or Julian can take over. The question you need to ask yourself, if you are thinking about implementing RPA or process mining, is how does that fit into the bigger picture in your company? Simply by starting to do process mining or RPA, and I mentioned that in my introduction, yes, it can have benefits, but please be aware that once you grow more mature with these kind of tools, they need to become embedded in the way that you treat your business processes in the first place. So a typical timeline for RPA implementation, and Tom, you'll correct me if I'm saying anything rubbish, is that you first need to think about what candidates do I have? Where do I want to do this kind of automation? How am I going to make sure that once I do have a number of robots in place, that they actually are maintained and managed to make sure that they run at the best possible form? Just remember back to the short introduction. Root cause number 2, the UI, the target UI was changed, but the robot did not get the memo yet. Well, that kind of thing is the one thing that you want to avoid. Now, Tom, you've been, I think, more involved with the actual RPA implementation side. So can I ask you to just briefly delve into that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the RPA part, so as Caspar, you just mentioned absolutely correctly, you first of all, of course, have to have a look on what is relevant, what should be automated. So regarding process mining, I think Julian can let some words in a minute or so. For task mining, there is a very typical approach where we say, okay, set up the environment, and then try to use 2 or 3 employees, and record some interaction data here for 3 days, something about 3 days. Then you make a first round of iteration in order to adjust a little bit the algorithm, in order to adjust the black and white listing, and then do that again. And then typically you have, after about a week, very good insights already on what should be executed on the very detailed level. So this is a typical, at least from an initial perspective, when you're starting with the first things and investigating how the tools work, that is a very practical way to go, which leads to very, very quick results, which is very good able to repeatable. For the process mining part, Julian, I think you can also share some insight.
Yeah, so maybe a typical approach how you start with process mining is that you use a kind of a snapshot of your data. So that could be maybe a couple of months or maybe a year to get a first feeling on how your process behaved in reality. And this also answers the question, is it worth to then continue with a ongoing monitoring of this process? So meaning that we set up direct connections to these applications and to receive basically on a real-time basis information out of these source systems. So that's typically the way how we approach these projects.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for the elaborate answers. There's so many questions that we haven't been able to answer them all, but again, we'll make sure to answer them offline. And for now, thank you. This leaves us just one more bit, which is the key learnings. So Caspar, I would like to hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Ricardo. First of all, thanks, Tom and Julian. I really enjoyed this demonstration and slideshow that you put on. So thank you for that. If I look, there's two things that I would like to take from this webinar. Firstly, I would like to just revisit briefly the poll that you did earlier after the introduction I gave. And what struck me most is that most of the participant responses, certainly on the questions, have you implemented RPA and also for PPM, is that roughly 60% of the people indicate that they were either exploring, experimenting, or already implemented it. And then question 3 came where I said, listen, did you combine it? And then 70% said not yet, but considering. And I think that is also the trend that we see nowadays is companies have been exploring and experimenting and already working with RPA on one hand and process mining on the other hand. And I think that Tom proved a very, very excellent case and say, listen, you can combine the two. There is added value in using process mining on one hand and RPA on the other hand and make sure they work together. Which brings me to my second point, and that is that ultimately the success of your RPA implementation depends on many different things, but I'll highlight 3 major ones. The first one is, and I mentioned earlier, and also Tom mentioned, the thorough candidate identification. Make sure that you start working on the right candidates for automation. And you can use process mining for exactly that purpose to help you find those candidates. And then obviously, yes, you need to make that decision yourself. Do we actually proceed with the automation of this step? Yes or no? I mean, automating things does not dismiss your intelligence and your common sense. You do need to apply that in all cases. Secondly, RPA success depends on excellent communication. RPA does not automatically have a good reputation when it comes to the workforce. They think RPA still is going to be losing jobs. Make sure that you make that clear from the very start that it's supporting, it's not replacing. And thirdly, and I stressed that once and I'll stress it again and again if I need to, embedded governance. Make sure that your RPA initiative is not a standalone activity. It's not just governed or handled by a small group of people. It needs to be connected to the broader way that you manage and maintain your business processes and all of the related applications to that. Having said that, so keep that in mind, and I'll give it back to Ricardo to close out the session. Well, thank you all for listening.
Yes, thank you, Caspar. It was truly our pleasure to organize this session. I hope it was inspirational for all of you. Obviously, you can imagine there's still many more questions, so we're open to be in contact with you and dealing with those questions. Obviously, if you go to the next slide, Caspar, we also have some partners in place that can help you with these expertise, whether it concerns RPA or process mining or business transformation in general. These are some of the partners that we have in Benelux, as this was originally meant as a Benelux webinar, but I'm happy that we have an international crowd today. So we have MLC, McCoy, Bequint, and iMendos, the latter especially focused in Belgium. So certainly reach out to those partners if you want some advice on the approach and implementation. And having that said, this brings us to the end of our innovation seminar today. The recordings will be made available afterwards, and we'll be sure to follow up with an email to provide you with some additional information to further help you in your exploration journey. And for now, I hope we'll stay in touch, and I hope everyone stays safe. Thank you very much, and speak soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day.